Richie Evans left an unforgettable impression on everyone he ever met, and on anyone who ever saw the orange number 61 run a modified race.
You're talking about a legend in a series. He owned that modified series.
You knew when he came to town that he was going to be the man to beat. And the record that he set is just unbelievable.
Grassroots, hard-nosed racer that worked on his cars, built his cars. Here he is in the Hall of Fame. That's a cool thing.
He come to Martinsville and tore their line up and went to Winston and blew them away over there. Now, I'll tell you, he put on a show for him. He's one of the best race drivers I ever seen.
He was a fascinating character, one of those rare people who wins a lot of races and yet never loses an ounce of popularity.
If you have to name one guy that has been instrumental in the modified series, people are gonna say Richie Evans. He was what Dale Earnhardt and Richard Petty are to the Cup Series. That's what Richie was to modifieds.
He had that John Wayne type of cool. You knew he was good. He knew he was good, but he wasn't cocky, and he was a guy's guy, a driver's driver.
People will come in this world, and when we're all gone, and have success and win all these races, but you're never ever going to replace Richie Evans.
Here is Evans in the press tab, his overwhelming favorite.
9 times he won the NASCAR Modified Championship.
Evans gets the fight off the fourth turn. Evans now moves up along the outside. It is Evans, the defending national NASCAR Modified champion, Richie Evans.
Telling stories around the campfire at the track. It's one of the best rituals of racing, especially for those who spent their lives in and around the sport. These are the friends and family of Richie Evans, and they know how much Richie liked people around him to have fun.
He greased a pole and put $500 on the top of it. It was his first pig roast. He said, "Lynn, you got to go out there and get the girls going. Get the girls climbing that." I said, "Oh, God." I didn't bring clothes to wear, but he was an instigator, that's for sure.
Stories about Richie Evans' amazing life come easy to anyone who knew him. He grew up in upstate New York, but this pastoral landscape didn't appeal to Richie's love of speed, and he made his mark on a place with a few more cars and people. A town called Rome.
Richie Evans was a real Roman. He was born here. He worked here. He started his mechanic business here, and then he branched out into modified racing, and he's an icon. This particular city is a very safe city. Blue collar, hardworking people. They weren't given anything. That's what you have in upstate New York. And agriculture was always a big facet of upstate.
Ernie and Sadie Evans owned a small dairy farm in Westernville, New York. Agriculture demands a strong work ethic, which Ernie instilled into his children, Rich and Sandy.
We had a small farm in comparison to today, 30, 40 cows. We had a couple horses. We raised some calves from the cows. Because my father was so conservative, he did make money on it because he was conservative and saved. He was, in fact, they never had a checkbook until my father died. It was cash. My brother would buy used tractors, equipment. He would go to these auctions, get them, bring them home, check them out, fix them, and usually he took care of them. And they didn't usually break down in the field because he would always be repairing them in advance.
Even then, Rich and the high school yearbook staff knew he would put his love of cars to use in the near future. He soon said bye-bye to the farm. Rich worked on hot rods and raced just for fun, and he worked at a service station to pay for it.
Early on, your dad, he worked in a couple different gas stations for a man named Joe Jones. He was a street racer and a drag racer back then.
Pretty good street racer though, right?
Utica Rome Speedway came along in 1960. It was built, and in 61 they started racing. And that was very local for Richie. He was a guy who had done some drag racing, both organized and unorganized. Some friends of his over time just told him that, you know, if you'd go over to Utica Rome and try running a stock car, you can actually get paid for this. You know, it'd be more than running for pink slips. You know, you could get a trophy, you can get some cash, and he did it. You know, and by all accounts was kind of not very good at the start.
We went to Utica Rome Speedway one night, and he says, you know what? I think I'd like to start racing. I says, oh, come on, you know, you're doing so good at drag racing. What do you mean you want to start racing? And he says, yeah, I want to start. So we went to Utica Rome, and he was not even of age. He was 18 years old at the time. He had to be 21, and he got in somehow. I don't remember exactly how he got in, but he started racing.
Richie and Barbara married and started a family. And he bought his own gas station in Rome. But he kept racing with whatever resources he could find.
Your dad was a low-dollar racer back then and trying to save money any way he could, and came time to paint the car, and just seems to be there was a story that there happened to be some Department of Public Works orange laying around, and somehow it ended up at your father's shop and the car got painted that color.
It is true. Oh yeah, it's a true story.
The details are foggy, but they apparently had an inside man at the town highway garage in Rome, the city garage.
Through conversation and people he knew, he was able to secure some of that at a low cost for his race car.
I've tried hard to figure out exactly who it was that got the paint, but somehow the paint ended up in Richie's hands, and his cars were basically a municipal snowplow orange from then on.
Them old school guys, man, they won't say that they, you know, it just happened to show up.
It just happened to show up at the shop, and it just happened to get on the race car.
It just happened to be the same color as the snow plows in the city of Rome, which is...
And I think he got a kick out of the, you know, the hooligan nature of that. You know, it's he wasn't shy about telling the story. He just wasn't going to implicate whoever it was that got him the paint. He won the last feature of the year at Utica Rome in 1965, which was his first modified victory of any kind. You know, it wasn't that long after that, 67, 68. You know, he didn't put up the huge numbers he did later on, but you could see the win totals growing every year. And I think it was all just a matter of figuring out the cars, and that helped him refine whatever natural ability he had, you know, and obviously he had a lot.
Around the campfire, the friends and family of Richie Evans talk about how much modified racing has changed.
He'd be disappointed if he had to run the tour the way it is today, because it's down to 12 or 14 races. When he ran for the championship, we ran 80, 90 races a year and traveled all over the country, Canada to Florida. And the way the tour is now, your father would be sad if he saw it the way it is now, and I'm sure he would try to change it.
The modified series has taken its lumps, you know, through the years, and now you rush to get to the races. You watch the races, you go home. You know, back then it was an all-day event. You know, there was 100 cars showing up. There was a lot of things going on, a lot of stories, and it's totally different now. I don't think that the young fan gets a grasp on anything right now of what the modifieds meant back then.
Modified racing has definitely changed since then. They raced as a living. They were racing 3, some 4 times a week. Now it's definitely more of a hobby.
There's 10, 12 cars that tries to run all the races, and we usually have somewhere between 16 to 20 cars at a normal race.
The modifieds are still just that. They're called a modified. You're allowed to modify them.
They're open wheels, they have Nerf bars, they're 2 inches off the ground. Our tires are 15-inch wide tires. The engines are the 18-degree engine. That's what the Cup cars run 7-8 years ago to keep our cost a little lower.
Per race, you're going to spend anywhere from $25,000 to $6,000. 95% of them pay $2,000 to win and fall off from there, $1,500 per second, so on and so forth. It is, for lack of a better word, a losing proposition. You could go out and win a race, but it's still going to be very, very difficult to pay your expense for that race.
I don't think anyone in the Southern Modified is making a living racing. We're all doing this for the fun of the sport. The young drivers are doing it to use as a stepping stone into future things. I'm doing it because I love to race.
Modified racing is definitely like no other form of racing. It's a lifestyle.
The lifestyle of a modified racer was different when Richie Evans ran. He used to run a lot more races, some that NASCAR sanctioned, and some they didn't.
We were running Utica Rome Speedway, which was NASCAR, and there was a track about an hour away, Fulton, which was not NASCAR, and your dad got in a little trouble for running that race.
If you ran a non-NASCAR race on the same day as a NASCAR race in your area, and you were a NASCAR member, you were liable to get suspended. And Utica Rome rained out on a Sunday, and Richie and a bunch of other guys ended up going to Fulton Speedway, which was, I guess, 50 or 60 miles away, and running a non-NASCAR race.
But a lot of guys used to do that. They'd put watercolor on their car, change the numbers, run under false names and everything, and then run back to Utica Rome. But your dad ended up winning the race.
Richie won the race. Jerry Cook was second. Lou Lazaro was third. Richie got thrown out. Jerry Cook didn't. Lou Lazaro didn't.
He was the only guy that was suspended, even though a bunch of guys had gone up there. But you know, he won the race. He was the most visible guy.
Came down to Utica Rome the next week, and they wouldn't let him in the pits. And they says, "You're fined and you're suspended because you ran an outlaw track." Well, your dad didn't want to pay the fine, so he ended up running outlaw for a while.
It didn't necessarily hurt his racing any, because he ended up running a lot of non-NASCAR tracks throughout New York, Western New York, and winning a lot of races. And some people say that those were the years in which he got better, because the cars in Western New York back then, they weren't NASCAR tracks, so you could kind of do more things, be more creative.
Meantime, he had Eddie Flemke drive his backup car at Utica Rome and Albany, Saratoga, which were NASCAR tracks, while your dad ran somewhere else. And Eddie was winning races with your dad's car.
One car would go east, one car would go west. And Richie'd call me on Friday night and say, "How'd we do?" I said, "Well, we won. How'd you do?" He says, "Well, we had a good day."
At the end of 1970, they show up at Utica Rome for the New Yorker 400, biggest race of the year at that place. But Richie had nothing to run that night, so he came with the car, and they wouldn't let him in the pits. He was suspended from NASCAR. You're not walking into the pits.
So your dad says, "Well, that's all right. We're going to pit the car outside in the parking lot." So they did. They pitted the car out in the parking lot, and every time they went, Eddie took the car in, he'd show his pit pass to the gate man, and he'd go in, practice, come back out.
You know, it had to maybe frost NASCAR a little bit to have their bad guy not only winning and still being in the headlines, but his car, you know, his orange car was still winning at the places he was thrown out of.
He won, right?
Eddie ended up winning.
Eddie won.
But yes, Eddie won that race too. That was something. Those outlaw days. Thank God they made up and got back in good graces with NASCAR.
Those good graces got a little help when Richie mentioned the right to work laws of the state of New York. Evans returned with something to prove.
Came back at the end of 71 for the New Yorker 400. He told the writer Pete Zanardi later on, "I've never wanted to win a race so bad." That it was his first time back, and he was at the local racetrack and just obliterated the field. There were no "I told you so's" or "I got you" or anything like that, but I think he liked the idea that victory kind of made a statement. He didn't win by a nose, he won by a lot, and it's like, hey, I'm back.
Soon after Richie's return, the 61 car got a new sponsor. Gene DeWitt owned a construction company. He saw something special in that racer from Rome.
The one thing is, the fella doesn't know the word "it can't be done." He's his ambition, he lives, eats, dreams, drinks racing, and when you put that much energy into anything, whether racing or playing poker, you're going to win.
B.R. DeWitt sponsored the number 61 from then on. With Gene's support, Richie Evans was about to rewrite the record books of modified racing.
Richie Evans still owns the lead. Stevens is second. Don Worley in number 45 is running third. And these boys fight it out through every corner.
Richie Evans knew that the only way to become a champion racer was through hard work from his crew and from himself.
He was always working on cars. You'd go by there at midnight, the gas station would be closed, but the lights would be on in the service bay, and your dad would be working on his hot rod.
He was the best mechanic in the city of Rome. He worked on his race cars 7 days a week, every single day. That's what made him so good.
I mean, you got there in the morning and you worked all day, and after supper it was back at the garage, and nothing happened until that race car was ready to go to the races. And it was ready to go when it was loaded on the trailer.
He could diagnose anything, work on anything.
He could figure out anything. He was a great mechanic.
He was pretty good with the tires and the carburetors too, though.
I think that was one of his big advantages, is he could read tires as well as he could. He would send me back in the shop, back where we stored the tires, and say, go get this tire I ran at Spencer or something, you know, a month ago. And I go back there and, God, they all look basically the same. Yeah. And he'd walk back there and he says, that one right there.
There's no man working at my garage an hour that I'm not there working with him. So I think that makes the guys work better, and I just don't pop in the garage and say, why the heck didn't you do this or that, you know. I think they feel that if I'm that committed, they should be that committed, and I think it makes everything work better.
Their commitment allowed Richie and the crew to challenge their biggest rival, the number 38 car, Jerry Cook, the reigning modified champion.
He saw what I was doing, and he wanted a piece of that too. So then it became what was called in Rome, New York, the crosstown rivalry.
Jerry Cook and Richie did a lot of decoy work. They would send one car and truck in one direction. If you went out of town a certain way to go to one track, you had to drive right by Cook's shop. And they'd say, all right, well, there goes Richie's truck. You know, they'd make a show of beeping the horn, and oh, there goes Richie's truck. They must be going to run up here. Well, it turns out they were running somewhere else, and Jerry might pull in there, and there's Richie. Well, the other car was a dummy. And Cookie did it to them, too. I mean, it was a cat and mouse game. I mean, who would do something like that anymore? You know, today you look at the schedule, and it is what it is, and there's 20 races or 18, whatever it is, and that's where you go. You know, back then there were 90 races. Every race was a NASCAR-sanctioned race, paid points. And to try to outfox each other and get a couple more in was part of the deal.
The stories that everybody's heard about sending one truck out of town going west and making a big circle around and coming east is all true. There was one night when I flew down south and ran a race at Hickory during the week, and my wife went to Fonda for a midweek race, and Richie was there, and Richie asked her where I was, and she looked at her watch. She says, probably starting a feature about right now down in Hickory.
After all was said and done, the number 61 prevailed. In 1973, Richie Evans and his loyal, dedicated crew won their first NASCAR Modified Championship.
You were a unit. You were a tight-knit group, and everybody watched out for everybody. The loyalty that he had with the people that worked with him and knew him, it was almost a pact, a unification. It was like a fraternity.
He'd bring the best out of you, and I mean, that's just another one of them talents, man.
He also knew, you work hard and you play hard. And we worked and accomplished what he wanted to get accomplished, and then we could relax.
We worked hard, we played hard. That was part of the deal.
Prepared before the race, partied after the race.
We were always accused of being, big partiers, but most of our partying didn't start till midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning.
There was always a little reward, just like you'd always keep some alcoholic beverages in the refrigerator at the shop for the free help. There was always a little reward at the end of the day.
But Oswego, when we were running second, and Billy was on the radio, he was freaking, he was ticked off. And he's yelling, pass him, you know you can pass him, why aren't you passing this guy? Richie didn't say nothing, and because at that time, you used to get a 6-pack a lap for running second. And Richie got back on the radio and he said, a 6-pack a lap. And that's all he said. We came home with a truckload of beer.
Yeah. Well, he could have been getting $10 a lap for leading. Instead, he's sitting there second collecting 6-packs.
Yeah. Never mind the lap money, we got beer.
Ray, do you remember what he made you do at Daytona?
There was a lot of things he made me do. Which one?
I think we'd gone down for one of his championships, and NASCAR provided a bus for all of us to go. And then when we got to Daytona, because you're a non-drinker, he designated you to be the driver of this 12-passenger or 16-passenger van.
Yeah. And, and we were driving along the beach. He wanted to see somebody that would get busted. He's yelling and screaming out the door. We were doing the weave pattern on the beach, remember? The door's wide open. So finally the cop cars come right in front of us. And the cop gets out, license and registration. I give him the papers, and he looks at me, and he goes to me, aren't you a little old to be doing this kind of stuff? And he says, I stopped you because of that loudmouth over there.
Richie loved to talk, freely gave advice on racing and equipment, even to guys who were about to compete against him.
He wasn't a guy that he felt that he was better than anybody. If somebody needed help, he would be the first guy to help. If you asked him a question, he'd probably not answer it fully, but he would, get you in the right direction where you needed to be.
He was free with his help. He'd help anybody. He'd help his biggest competitor if he needed it. He loved to help young drivers. Sometimes to my personal not liking, he'd walk right over to the car and do this, do that. Look, this is the spring we got in here, that. I'm going, why are you telling him that?
Billy used to get mad at him for, giving away setups and stuff. And Richie's theory was, I'd rather race somebody that was fast than somebody you don't know where they're going to land when they hit the corner,
I think the car was capable tonight. The old master beat me himself.
Let's have a handshake here first, and we'll get a little more conversation in with both of them.
One thing I want to say, so many times when the chips were down, this guy has helped me out an awful lot. I'm an independent, and so many times he's loaned me stuff and given me good advice. Tonight he gave me some good advice on a tire. I can't thank him enough. The guy is really a super racer. He's the guy that makes racing what it is today. He's the guy you got to beat. And damn, I'll tell you, he's one tough competitor. And a good friend of mine. Thanks a lot, Richie. Proud to be beat by you.
In 1975, Richie stopped running for NASCAR championships. He still raced full-time, but his attention was focused on a new series.
He had lost the title in '74, but I don't think that chased him away. There was a new circuit forming in upstate New York called NERA, N-E-A-R-A, which was an organization that was good on paper, but they seemed to do everything wrong, and they only lasted a couple of years. But I think the part of it that looked good on paper to Richie was it was a small amount of travel. You didn't have to run to Virginia every other week and didn't have to go into Connecticut or Massachusetts every week. I think he liked the idea of doing it, staying close to home and still winning a lot of races that paid pretty good.
But Richie couldn't stay away from NASCAR for long. It wasn't money that drew him back. It was the success of his old crosstown rival.
It bothered Richie that at the end of the year you might be in a tavern in Rome and somebody would say, boy, that's something about Jerry Cook winning another NASCAR national title. I think he probably maybe just heard it once too many. He and Gene DeWitt decided before '78 that they were going to run for it again.
Once again, the Orange 61 was a fixture at NASCAR point races, and the Rapid Roman became a fixture in Victory Lane. But now he was even better than before. 1978 began one of the best eras that any racer has ever had at any level. Richie won race after race any way he could.
The exciting race at Martinsville with Jeff Bodine, that was the end of that race, was absolutely the most exciting thing.
On this particular day, I'd already won the late model race. It was first, and had a fast car for the modified race.
They didn't like each other because both of them used to win a lot.
The Rapid Roman gave me a little tap going into turn one, but I survived, didn't hit anything.
Bodine gathers it back in. Evans goes underneath him as Evans took advantage of a sideways move.
But it put me behind, but pretty determined.
When they started banging and beating each other, and I mean racing, I mean hard.
Down the back straightaway, we're coming to get the white flag. He put the bumper to me and knocked me up high and out of the groove.
I looked at my dad, I said, there's going to be a big wreck coming off of 4 on this last lap, you watch.
Going into turn 3, I caught it. It was amazing. I don't know how I went that fast, but I caught him going into turn 3. So I put the bumper to him and had him crossed up. I mean, there was no way he was going to win this race. I was going to beat him.
Off the turn, sideways goes Evans. Here comes Bodine. They fight. Bodine is in the wall. Evans high on the wall. He crosses the line first.
I was right there behind it all. Darn it, they both made it over the line. There wasn't much left, but they both crossed the line, so it was nothing but a pile of junk laying there when I got there.
Of course, everyone in the place, all the crew members, all the drivers, all the fans, thought, well, this is going to be one heck of a fight. When they get out of those cars, they're going to charge each other and just go at it. We looked down at each other probably about 100 yards away and just kind of smiled. We had respect.
Last lap, can you tell us what happened?
The guy crossed up in the corner and I got outside of him and he see me coming and just drove me into the wall. The man just doesn't know how to lose.
Richie, you're counting the last lap.
So I got around him there and he tried to just cut right into me and wreck me before I even got to the finish line.
But you're okay, Richie?
Oh yeah, as long as you win, you're okay.
They had to tow the car into winner's circle, and his car is all beat up and smoking, and he just got that Richie Evans smile, It's just beat Jeff Bodine, and I won another Martinsville race.
He won everywhere in every way. From 1978 through 1981, the 61 ran more than 300 races and won more than half. Through 1985, Richie Evans and his guys took 18 track championships and every single NASCAR modified championship for 8 straight years.
Evans on the outside. Look at Evans. Evans on the outside. Comes from 5th into the lead. Evans caught the green and went for it, and he got it. Evans with a fabulous move on the outside.
Rich was at the top of his game and was having fun doing it. He was a racer's racer. If he could run 7 nights a week, Ray, you know that, we'd be running 7 nights a week. He loved the competition.
And he competed against the biggest names in stock car racing. The Superspeedway modified races at Daytona attracted the stars of the Cup Series, including Bobby Allison, Neil Bonnet, and Darrell Waltrip. In 1978, Richie went to Florida determined to beat the best.
We looked at the rules and we said, man, you take a Camaro and slick that bad boy up, you would have quite the aerodynamic advantage. We had such a huge advantage over everybody else because we had a car like nobody else's. And so we won that race handily. I think Richie run second in that one.
Back then it was always you run second and then slingshot the guy in the end. He finished second to Darrell Waltrip under a caution.
Richie was not about to let a poorly timed caution impact his chance of winning in 1979.
They dropped the green flag and all you seen was that orange car leaving, 2 black marks. I mean, he didn't run second for nothing. He just got out there and run away with it.
They blew away the Daytona field in 1979 and in 1980. Despite his success on the big track, Richie never ran a single race in NASCAR's Cup Series.
I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell what Richie's career might have been if he'd moved up to Cup. Richie just didn't seem to like that. He was very content, very happy racing those modifieds around the short tracks all over the East Coast.
He didn't have to because the Cup stuff was just starting to grow back then, and there wasn't a lot of money in it. And the stuff that he was doing, the money he was making when he was winning the championships and winning all the races, he was racing 4, 5, 6 times a week. You know, he'd win half of them, 3/4 of them every week, so he was making a good living.
On the line with us from Rome, New York, Richie Evans. How come you never, in light of all your successes, decide to pick up and move south and run for even bigger dollars?
Well, I never got into a situation where I thought that I could afford it until probably I was mid-30s, and I just felt then it was not the time to go waste 2, 3, 4 years to get going, and then have 4 or 5 years left, you know.
There was a half a dozen good teams. Today there's a lot of good teams. It made a lot of sense for him to stay where he was at.
I would dare say that Petty's title and Earnhardt's would have been in trouble if he would have decided to go down there, because he was passionate about winning. I mean, no matter what it was, whether it was racing or if he was playing foosball for who was buying supper that night, you know, when we was, you know, out. He only played to win.
Rural upstate New York seems far away from the racetrack. Richie Evans found peace from his busy life here at a place he partly owned, the Freeman Hotel. Recently, his youngest daughter, Tara, took over.
It is where my childhood memories started with my father. I've always known it as a place that he loved to get away. And he didn't have a phone up here or cable. It was just his way to get away. And if anybody wanted to find him, they would just have to drive up here.
He used to bring a lot of his race car buddies up here. Have a big old pig roast and party to hardy.
They would have all kinds of parties up here. New Year's parties, Halloween, pig roast, you name it. They've probably celebrated it up here.
This was Richie's deal. He really loved it up here. He wanted to sit here and have a cocktail and watch the cars go by. Just relax. He wasn't going to have no telephones. If they want to talk to me, they can come up here.
I think he didn't need the elaborate life. He just needed to relax. He had another family, my brother and I, an ex-wife, and my mother, who was a flight attendant, who was gone for 2, 3, 4 nights a week. There was a lot of juggling, I think.
Hi, Richie. Gonna watch your dad?
Attention was a tough thing to do when time was minimal.
He did do his best at making time for us the best way he knew how, I believe. But as far as an everyday thing or every weekend, no.
There was a lot of pressure on him. I don't know how much longer he would have went on racing. I think he would have done another couple of years, but I guess I'd like to think that he would have started to thinking about doing something different. Still in racing, I think he wanted to slow down.
But he never got the chance. In 1985, Richie and the number 61 were still going strong.
1985, Richie was really fast. It was the first year of what's now known as the NASCAR Whelen Modified Tour. It was a 28 race schedule that first year, and as different guys shook out in the points chase, Richie ended up kind of pulling out again, and he clinched the title in the second to the last race of the year, which was at Thompson, Connecticut.
Joining us now from Rome, New York, a man who wrapped up his 8th straight NASCAR modified title and his 9th championship overall, Richie Evans. You fellas get set to head to Martinsville. Was it any more difficult or any easier this year as compared to the past?
There was like 10 cars that were chasing the points this year, where in other years it would get narrowed down to 2 or 3 near the end of the season. So we're probably a little more proud of the one this year.
Richie, get in the truck and head on down to Martinsville. We'll see you in a couple of days.
Thanks, Eli, and let's hope we can handle this down there.
We already had clinched the championship, so there was really no pressure for that particular race other than go out and try and win it.
Well, I remember that morning. Tara was there right with me when Dad came. We were staying at the neighbors getting watched, and before he got on the plane, he showed up there before we went to school. And he got on his knee and he told both me and Tara that he loved us. And he'd never come to the babysitters and tell us that. And that was the first time he did it. He told us he loved us, go to school. He'll see us when he gets back.
It was kind of a strange day. Rich flew down, usually rode down with us in the truck. Anyway, we got down there, and Thursday morning we got in the racetrack, got the car unloaded and everything, and one of the first things we used to do when we get to the track is go locate the tires that we were going to race. That particular morning we couldn't get tires. They hadn't arrived yet, which was, all right, I knew your dad, you know, how he was with tires. That would concern him. So we were talking, boy, he's not going to be happy when he gets here. He showed up. He seemed to be in a good mood. And I told him that we couldn't get the tires yet. And I was surprised it didn't really bother him all that much. Kind of strange. He just seemed to be, don't worry about it. A strange weekend, and then he went out and practiced.
I remember hitting the wall, and he ended up going into turn 3, and the car stopped in turn 4. And
we got to the car, we knew it was bad.
You know, we were all trying to get equipment, saws and hacksaws, anything to get him cut out of the car.
Went to the hospital. Kenny and I sat in the room for about an hour before we called Lynn, because we just couldn't bring ourselves to do it. And the track kept telling us to make the call because they needed to make an announcement, and it was the hardest thing I ever had to do in my life.
I came in the house and the phone was ringing. I wasn't going to answer it. I didn't recognize the voice. It was very quiet, and then I all of a sudden realized after about 3 Lyns that it was William, and he gave me the news. I kind of hated you that very moment, I really did, and I kind of let out a scream because I thought, why? I told my mother, well, why would he say something so awful to me? But now I was worried about the kids, all the kids. So I called Richard's ex-wife.
The phone rang. It was Lynn telling me that she had some bad news. And from then I just called my daughter. She was in Florida. Told her. I called Janelle. She was living with her boyfriend at the time.
And the phone rang, and it was my mother, and I couldn't tell whether she was laughing, hysterically laughing over something good, or she was hysterical because of something bad, and it was the bad.
Even though it was a pre-cell phone era, quickly word got around, and it was a massive. People would call you during the day, and no caller ID, so hello, and there'd be somebody crying on the other end of the phone, and it was a guy crying, and so you didn't have to say, well, geez, I wonder if he knows. They were either calling to see if you knew, or they were calling to discuss it.
At first, I didn't want to believe it, Man, it was kind of devastating. I just don't believe it today.
The whole racing industry was truly saddened when we all received the unfortunate news of the death of National Modified Champion Richie Evans.
Richie's 9th championship was his last. For his family and for the entire sport, Richie's loss changed everything.
It was a huge turning point. A lot of things changed after that. The tour, modified tour, was just getting started at that point, and we lost our leader. So someone else had to take that point, and there really wasn't anybody else.
What about the future for Richie Evans? It's been a lot of years in this business for you. Do you have any foreshadowing as to what might happen down the road, or are you just going to keep at it in the same pace? Or?
Yeah, I'm just going to start out in the spring with 2 new cars instead of 2 old cars. That's the only change I see.
Excellent. That's excellent. Thank you very much. Got enough?
In 2011 at Loudon, New Hampshire, the owner of Tommy Baldwin Racing paid tribute to Richie Evans' induction to the NASCAR Hall of Fame with that familiar orange paint scheme.
It was good to get his name back out there and let everybody know who he was, and I think it made a lot of people look look up Richie and find out where he was about, and got him a lot more known with the fan of today. It's been really an honor for us to do the Hall of Fame Richie card, honor a guy that we all looked up to.
Well, I'm on the voting panel for the NASCAR Hall of Fame, and I purposely brought his name up in our last meeting, and I said we need to look at some of the guys in other divisions other than Sprint Cup, and Richie Evans is certainly a guy that put the numbers up there, that he well deserves to be in the Hall of Fame.
The guys all knew that it was coming on, so they turned it on and watched the first couple, and maybe not this year, no big deal. And I walked away while they did the video, and then I heard them getting ready to announce the next one, so I walk back up to the plate, and they sat it, and everybody was, it was just, I don't know. Words can't explain what I felt.
When he was elected to the NASCAR Hall of Fame, previous nominees made it clear.
Richie Evans will join the Hall of Fame.
Richie Evans was a welcome member of their ranks, even though he never raced at the Cup level.
He's the only guy that I ever seen come down here and stir up all these short track drivers like he did. He come to Martinsville and tore their hiney up and went to Winston and blew them away over there. Now, I'll tell you, he put on a show for him. He's one of the best race drivers I ever seen.
One of my fondest memories is going to Martinsville and watching those modified races and watching Richie race up there, and you talking about a legend in a series. He owned that modified series, 9-time champion, won races everywhere he went, a perfect nominee for the Hall of Fame.
He just was he was what Dale Earnhardt and Richard Petty are to the Cup Series. That's what Richie was to modifieds.
Richie Evans is the essence of stock car racing to guys like me, the grassroots, guys that have never had a chance to rub elbows with the Allisons and Pearsons and Pettys and Yarboroughs. Richie was that guy.
The modified division deserved to be represented in the Hall of Fame. I'm proud that the modified division and Richie are being represented.
He raced anything, everything, and won that many championships. That's credentials right there to be in the NASCAR Hall of Fame.
More than 25 years later, the loss of Richie Evans is still felt by the series that he loved and by the people that loved him.
Richie Evans is and ever will be one of the best drivers there ever was.
I couldn't be any more proud for my division than for Richie Evans to be honored in the Hall of Fame.
You hate to ever say a guy was invincible, but in that stretch of time, he was as close as it came to invincible. He was one of those rare people who wins a lot of races and yet never loses an ounce of popularity.
It's so hard when you're living with a legend. You don't know that. Them little things that he did away from the racetrack, away from the bars, helped a lot of people.
We're very proud of what my father accomplished. Would never think to take any of that away from him. Absolutely 120% deserving.
I think he got the respect that he deserved. I don't think a lot of people respect the class he came from, the modified drivers, the hard work that they put into what they did. I think it's an honor to see his name on that TV that day, that's all.
If something's brought up within, topics, and somebody doesn't know who Richie Evans is, I turn to him and I tell them to just go home and Google his name because it is amazing. And I never took his, I guess I don't walk around bragging about who he was. I'd rather somebody say, hey, your dad was one hell of a guy.
He was just rich. He just did his thing. He lived his life, and that's what you saw is what you got.
I have good memories and bad memories. To this day, I think of Richie often. I still have feelings for the man.
He was the love of my life. He gave me 2 beautiful children. He gave me a good life. I think we cried on each other's shoulders, William. I think we both felt the pain.
He was my best friend, a great person to work with. somebody I admired, and a tragic loss, something I've struggled to cope with forever, still today, and it's nice to know that he's being remembered. I was hoping he'd get in someday, just didn't think it'd be this soon.